The Galactic Senate was, without a doubt, the most boring place in all 17 sectors of the known universe. Anyone who claimed otherwise was either a politician or severely brain-damaged, though Commander Xylax Vorn often suspected those two categories shared significant overlap. Xylax drummed his 6 digits against the polished surface of his command console, his scaled skin reflecting the soft purple glow of the monitoring systems. Another day, another mind-numbing security detail at the Senate Hall on Nexus Prime. Just what every decorated Floraxian war veteran dreamed of doing with their career. "Sir, the delegates from the Andromedan Coalition have arrived," Lieutenant Crix announced, her antenna twitching with what passed for excitement among the Threll species. "Wonderful," Xylax replied, not bothering to keep the sarcasm from dripping into his voice. Another group of self-important bureaucrats to protect while they debate whether the color of official Senate documentation should be changed from beige to slightly less beige. Truly, we are living in historic times. Crix tilted her insectoid head, confusion evident in her compound eyes. The Threll weren't known for their grasp of sarcasm. "I believe today's agenda primarily concerns trade tariffs in the Cygnus sector, Commander." "Even better," Xylax muttered, rising from his station. "I will alert the galaxy's historians immediately." Security protocols dictated that Xylax personally greet any delegation with ambassador status or higher, which meant he had to trudge down to the grand entrance hall to welcome a bunch of Andromedans who would barely acknowledge his existence. The Andromedan Coalition, with their silicon-based biology and collective consciousness, considered most individual life forms to be little more than amusing pets. As Xylax made his way through the gleaming corridors of the Senate building, he couldn't help but admire the architecture despite his foul mood. The structure was a marvel of engineering, a perfect blend of the 17 major species' architectural styles, rising in graceful spires of crystalline alloy and photonic glass. It was meant to represent unity and cooperation across the galaxy. What a cosmic joke that was. In reality, the Senate was a cesspit of political maneuvering, backstabbing, and species interest politics. The only thing the 17 major powers agreed on was their shared disdain for the younger species trying to gain recognition. Species like humans. Humans. The galaxy's newest troublemakers. Barely a century since they'd stumbled upon faster-than-light travel, and already they were demanding a seat at the table. Emperor Zorvanix had made his position quite clear: no primitive, emotionally unstable species that still waged wars among their own kind would be granted Senate representation. The Floraxian Empire, as the oldest and most powerful member of the Senate, had considerable sway in such matters. Xylax reached the grand entrance hall just as the Andromedan delegation floated in. Literally floated, they disdained walking as primitive locomotion and used personal gravity nullifiers to hover about half a meter above the ground. Show-offs. "Greetings, esteemed delegates of the Andromedan Coalition," Xylax said, performing the traditional 6-armed salute of respect. "The Senate welcomes you to Nexus Prime." The lead Andromedan, a shimmering crystal formation with pulsating blue lights at what Xylax assumed was its core, turned what might have been its sensory apparatus toward him. "We acknowledge your greeting, Commander Vorn of the Floraxian Security Force," the Andromedan replied, its voice a strange, harmonious blend of tones that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Our collective anticipates a productive session." Before Xylax could respond with the proper diplomatic platitude, a commotion erupted at the far end of the entrance hall. His security training kicked in immediately, hand moving to the plasma disruptor at his hip as he turned to assess the threat. What he saw made him freeze, all 6 of his eyes widening in shock. A single figure had burst through the security checkpoint, moving with a speed that shouldn't have been possible given the gravity on Nexus Prime. The figure was bipedal, relatively small compared to most sentient species, with a curious lack of scales, exoskeleton, or other sensible protective covering. Instead, it had an outer layer of artificial fabric wrapped around a soft, vulnerable body. A human. But that wasn't what caused Xylax's mandibles to fall open in shock. It was what the human was carrying. clutched in one hand was the unmistakable head of Emperor Zorvan Ix of the Floraxian Empire. The Emperor's normally purple scales had faded to a sickly gray in death, his 6 eyes dull and lifeless, the imperial crown still perched at a jaunty angle on his crested skull. The human sprinted into the center of the entrance hall, skidded to a halt on the polished floor, and with a dramatic flair that would have impressed even the theatrically inclined draconids, hurled the Emperor's severed head. It rolled across the immaculate floor, coming to rest at the hovering base of the Andromedan delegation. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. The human, a female if Xylax remembered his xenobiology correctly, stood there breathing heavily, a wild grin on her face. She was covered in what Xylax recognized as Floraxian blood, a distinctive orange fluid that still dripped from the ceremonial blade strapped to her back. "My name is Captain Maya Frost of Earth," the human announced, her voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "And I think it's time we had a little chat about Senate representation." If there was a protocol for this situation, Xylax had never learned it. In his 27 cycles of security service, human assassinates the Emperor and delivers his head to the Senate had never come up in training. Seize the assassin. He finally managed to bellow, snapping out of his shock. Every security officer in the hall drew their weapons, converging on the lone human. Captain Frost didn't look concerned. If anything, her grin widened. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said casually, pulling a small device from her pocket. "Unless you want the rest of your Emperor delivered in equally small pieces. The explosive charges my team placed throughout his palace are on a deadman switch. If you shoot me, they detonate. And let me tell you, we got creative with the placement." Xylax signaled his officers to halt, mind racing. This had to be a bluff. No human could possibly infiltrate the Imperial Palace on Florax Prime. The security there made the Senate look like a public park. "You are lying," he said, trying to sound confident despite the growing knot of dread in his gut. "No single human could assassinate Emperor Zorvan." Maya Frost laughed, and it was a sound that sent chills down Xylax's spine. Not because it was menacing, but because it was so genuinely amused. "Who said I was alone?" she replied. "Humans don't operate like you hierarchical species. We are more collaborative." The Andromedan delegate, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly emitted a high-pitched frequency that Xylax recognized as their equivalent of alarm. Our collective senses truth in the human statement. The crystalline being announced. Quantum entanglement communications indicate multiple disturbances at the Imperial Palace on Florax Prime. Impossible. Utterly impossible. And yet, there was the Emperor's head on the floor, his distinctive crown jewels glittering under the Senate hall lights. Now. Captain Frost continued, seemingly relaxed, despite being surrounded by the most advanced security forces in the galaxy. "I'm here as a diplomatic envoy. Believe it or not. My team and I have just demonstrated that your security isn't as impenetrable as you think, that your most protected leader isn't beyond our reach." She took a step forward, and despite himself, Xylax took a step back. "The message is simple. Humanity deserves a seat at this table, and we are done asking nicely." The sheer audacity of it all left Xylax speechless. This wasn't just an assassination, it was a power move on a galactic scale, one that would change the balance of power forever. As if on cue, the Senate chamber doors burst open, and a stream of panicked delegates poured into the entrance hall, having just received news of the Emperor's demise. The cacophony of different species all expressing shock in their native tongues created a chaotic backdrop to the tense standoff. Among them was Senior Delegate Taxis Norm, the Emperor's chief advisor and representative in the Senate. His scales were pale with shock as his gaze fell upon his Emperor's severed head. What madness is this?" Taxis stammered, all 6 of his eyes blinking rapidly in distress. "Not madness," Captain Frost corrected. "Politics. Human style." Xylax found his voice at last. "You have committed an act of war against the most powerful empire in the galaxy." Whatever point you are trying to make will be lost when our armadas turn your homeworld to ash." The human's smile never faltered. That would be concerning if your armada still existed. A cold dread washed over Xylax. "What do you mean?" As if in answer, every communication device in the hall began chiming simultaneously. Xylax's personal communicator vibrated against his wrist, and with a growing sense of doom, he activated it to see a priority alert from Floraxian High Command. The message was brief but devastating. Imperial Defense Fleet compromised. Multiple capital ships reporting catastrophic system failures. Evidence of coordinated attack. All units returned to defensive positions. "You see," Captain Frost explained, as if she were discussing something as mundane as the weather, "while I have been giving my dramatic speech here, my colleagues have been implementing what we call a system-wide reset of your military capabilities." The Senate Hall erupted into chaos as delegates received similar messages from their own worlds. Whatever the humans had done, it wasn't limited to the Floraxian Empire. Impossible. Thaxis shrieked, his composure completely shattered. "Our systems are isolated, protected by quantum encryption that would take millennia to breach." Maya Frost shrugged, looking almost apologetic. "Yes, well, that might have been true before you all got so excited about that cache of ancient technology you discovered in the Sagittarius arm last cycle. Turns out those convenient upgrades you so eagerly integrated into your systems had some backdoors. And we found the keys." Xylax felt the floor shifting beneath him, and not metaphorically. The artificial gravity was fluctuating. Another system failure. "The precursor technology," he whispered, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. The entire Senate had been in a frenzy to acquire and implement the advanced technology discovered in an ancient alien vault. A technology that was supposedly millions of years beyond current galactic capabilities. "Bingo," Captain Frost said, pointing a finger at him with a strange gesture that must have had meaning to humans. "You should really read the terms and conditions before installing unknown tech into your critical infrastructure." "But how?" Xylax demanded. "How could humans possibly understand precursor technology when our best scientists have spent decades deciphering just fragments of it?" For the first time, Captain Frost's smile faltered slightly, replaced by an expression Xylax couldn't quite interpret. "Because we have seen it before," she said quietly. Or rather, a version of it. Let's just say we had a historical advantage when it came to recognizing certain patterns in the code. Before Xylax could process this cryptic statement, a new figure entered the hall. Another human, male this time, dressed in what appeared to be formal attire by human standards. He walked with the confident bearing of a diplomat rather than a warrior. "Captain Frost," the newcomer said with a slight nod. "I see you have made quite the entrance." "Ambassador Kaito," she replied. "Right on schedule." "Ambassador." Xylax's mind reeled. This was a coordinated diplomatic mission? The male human Ambassador Kaito surveyed the chaotic scene with calm eyes before addressing the assembled delegates. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Senate, I apologize for the dramatic nature of our introduction. I am Ambassador Ryota Kaito of the United Earth Government. I'm here to negotiate humanity's admission to the Senate, as well as certain security arrangements that will benefit us all." Thaxis, still staring at his emperor's head, found enough composure to hiss, "You murder our emperor and expect us to negotiate with you?" "Your emperor," Captain Frost interjected, "personally ordered the destruction of 3 human colony ships last month. Ships carrying civilians, including children. He called it pest control." Xylax felt a sinking sensation in his gut. The classified reports had crossed his desk. The Emperor had indeed authorized the interception of human vessels approaching the Cygnus sector, claiming they were violating sovereign Floraxian space. But the reports had listed the ships as military reconnaissance vessels. If they had actually been colony ships. Ambassador Kaito's voice cut through Xylax's thoughts. "We come with both the stick and the carrot, delegates of the Senate. Captain Frost has demonstrated the stick. Allow me to offer the carrot. In addition to finding vulnerabilities in your precursor-derived systems, Our scientists have made significant breakthroughs in understanding the technology itself, breakthroughs we are prepared to share with our allies. The Andromedan delegate, who had been unnervingly silent, pulsed with blue light. The human speaks truth again, it announced. Our collective detects genuine technological advancements in their neural patterns. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gathered delegates. If the Andromedans, with their silicon-based intelligence that was notoriously difficult to deceive, confirmed the humans had valuable knowledge, we have one simple request, Ambassador Kaito continued. A seat at the table. Recognition of humanity as equals in this galactic community. And a promise that no more human ships will be fired upon without provocation. Xylax looked from the calm ambassador to the still grinning Captain Frost, who stood confidently despite being surrounded by enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. These humans had assassinated the most protected ruler in the galaxy, apparently crippled multiple military fleets simultaneously, and then walked into the heart of galactic governance to demand recognition. It was either the height of insanity or a level of strategic boldness that Xylax, a career military officer, couldn't help but admire on some disturbing level. Captain Frost caught his gaze and winked, another human gesture he wasn't familiar with. So, she said, spreading her arms wide, who wants to be the first to welcome humanity to the galactic community? The Senate chamber had never been so silent, for a governing body comprised of 17 different species, many of whom could vocalize in ranges that would shatter human eardrums. The complete absence of sound was almost physically painful to Xylax. Only the soft hum of failing environmental systems and the occasional crackle of emergency communications broke the tomb-like quiet. The Emperor's head still lay on the polished floor, a grotesque centerpiece to the most audacious diplomatic maneuver in galactic history. Senior Delegate Taxus was the first to recover, his shock transforming into rage with frightening speed. "You barbaric primates," he snarled, his voice box vibrating with fury. "You think this display of savagery will earn you respect? This confirms everything Emperor Zorvan said about your species." Ambassador Kaito remained unruffled. "What the Emperor said about us, or what he wanted you to believe? There's quite a difference." Enough. The new voice belonged to Grand Arbiter Pax Telvera of the Jurun Confederacy, the designated mediator of Senate proceedings. The ancient, tentacled being glided forward on his hover platform, his normally translucent skin flushed an angry orange. "This Senate has protocols, even in unprecedented circumstances," Pax announced, his translator device converting his liquid utterances into galactic standard. "Ambassador Kaito, was it? You and your associate will be detained while the Senate convenes an emergency session to address this situation." Captain Frost's hand drifted toward her belt. "Did you miss the part about the Deadman's switch, tentacles?" Xylax stepped forward, surprising himself. "Grand Arbiter, with respect, I suggest we hear the humans out." All eyes turned to him, and he felt his scales flush warm with the attention. Clearly they have technological capabilities we have underestimated. And if what they say about the colony ships is true, he left the implication hanging. If the Emperor had ordered the destruction of civilian vessels and covered it up, it would constitute a war crime under the Senate's own laws. Pax's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Commander Vorn, your concern is noted. But this is a matter for—" "Actually," interrupted a melodious voice, "the Floraxian commander speaks wisely." The speaker was Delegate Lyria Neem of the Ethereum Collective, her translucent body glowing with gentle blue bioluminescence. The Etherians were one of the oldest species in the Senate, rumored to have evolved past the need for physical form but maintaining solid bodies only to interact with younger races. "The rules of succession for the Floraxian Empire are quite clear," Lyria continued. "With Emperor Zorvan dead and no named heir, the Imperial Security Command assumes provisional authority. Which means, technically speaking, Commander Vorn here is now the ranking Floraxian representative until the Imperial Conclave names a successor." Xylax felt the blood drain from his face. By the void, she was right. As the highest-ranking security officer present, Protocol dictated he temporarily represent Floraxian interests in the absence of the imperial family or appointed delegates. It was an obscure rule, never invoked in modern times, because the emperor or his representatives were always present. Always, until a human woman with a ceremonial blade changed everything. This is outrageous. Thaxis spluttered. Commander Vorn is a soldier, not a diplomat. Which might be exactly what we need right now, Ambassador Kaito observed quietly. Thaxis' tentacles twisted in frustration, but the ancient being was nothing if not a stickler for procedure. Very well. The Senate will convene immediately. Commander Vorn will represent Floraxian interests. The human representatives will be permitted to present their case. He turned his massive eye toward Captain Frost. But the weapon stays outside the chamber. Maya Frost shrugged and unstrapped the ceremonial blade, handing it to one of her human companions who had materialized from the crowd. Xylax hadn't even noticed the other humans sprinkled throughout the hall. How many were there? No problem, she said with a disarming smile. I have made my point with it already. The transition to the main Senate chamber was tense but orderly. Security protocols were in disarray with the system failures, but Xylax's officers maintained a semblance of control, escorting delegates to their respective platforms in the vast amphitheater. The Senate chamber was the architectural marvel of the galaxy, a massive spherical space with hovering platforms arranged in concentric rings and allowing each delegation equal prominence. The chamber could adjust its atmospheric composition in localized zones, ensuring each species breathed their native air while still sharing the same space. At least, it normally could. With environmental systems faltering, emergency protocols had activated, filling the chamber with a universal atmosphere mix that was merely uncomfortable for most species rather than immediately lethal. Xylax found himself directed to the Floraxian platform, a position he'd observed 1,000 times during security detail but never expected to occupy. The gleaming purple and gold platform, designed to accommodate the Emperor's entourage, now felt cavernous with just him and Thaxis. Captain Frost and Ambassador Kaito were assigned a temporary platform near the bottom of the chamber, the traditional position for petitioning species. The Grand Arbiter's platform rose to the center of the sphere, signaling the beginning of the session. The delegates of the Galactic Senate. Pax intoned, his voice reverberating through the chamber. We face an unprecedented crisis. The assassination of Emperor Zorvan Ix of the Floraxian Empire, the apparent sabotage of multiple defense fleets, and now a demand for Senate representation from the species responsible. I call upon Ambassador Kaito of Earth to explain these actions before judgment is rendered. Ambassador Kaito's platform glided forward, the human standing with perfect composure. Esteemed delegates. He began, I stand before you representing not merely Earth, but all human colonies and settlements throughout the galaxy. For 30 years we have petitioned for representation in this body. For 30 years we have been denied, belittled, and increasingly actively persecuted. He activated a holographic display, showing the destruction of what appeared to be civilian ships. These are the colony vessels Hopeful Dawn, New Horizon, and Stargazer's Promise. Combined, they carried 7,823 human civilians seeking to establish a settlement in the unclaimed Cygnus Reach. They were intercepted and destroyed by Floraxian warships under direct orders from Emperor Zorvan Ix. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Xylax felt sick. He'd seen the classified reports, but they had identified the vessels as military scouts. The footage now playing showed clearly civilian ships. The Emperor, Kaito continued, classified this as a military action against unauthorized incursion. Our intelligence sources within the Imperial Palace revealed he privately called it pest control and was planning similar actions against other human settlements he deemed inconvenient. Axis lunged for the platform's communication controls. This is fabricated evidence. The Emperor would never. Actually, Xylax interrupted, accessing the platform's secure database with his military clearance. I can confirm these orders came directly from the Imperial Palace. He swallowed hard, knowing his next words might be considered treason if an emperor still lived. And they deliberately misclassified the targets. So the Senate erupted. Species that required no translation understood immediately. Others waited for their devices to process Xylax's statement before joining the uproar. Grand Arbiter Pax pounded his ceremonial staff, the resonating tone gradually restoring order. "This is a serious allegation, Commander Vorn," Pax said. "You are accusing your own emperor of falsifying military intelligence to justify attacking civilian vessels?" Xylax straightened to his full height. "I am stating facts, Grand Arbiter. The verification codes in these orders bear the Emperor's personal encryption. If the targets were indeed civilian colony ships as the humans claim, and this footage suggests they were, then yes, Emperor Zorvan violated Senate Protocol 7.3 regarding the treatment of non-combatant vessels." Ambassador Kaito nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Commander. It cannot be easy to speak against your own leader." Former leader, Captain Frost muttered from beside him, loud enough for nearby platforms to hear. The Andromedan delegate's platform moved forward, its crystalline form pulsing with communications. "Our collective has verified the human evidence," it announced. "Quantum pattern analysis confirms the footage is authentic and unaltered. The Andromedan Coalition finds sufficient cause to hear the humans' petition for Senate representation." Another delegate, Sorak Tull of the Draconid Imperium, moved his platform forward. The massive reptilian scales glittered with implanted jewels, denoting his high rank. "The Draconid Imperium concurs," Zorak rumbled. "If Emperor Zorvan violated Senate law and attacked civilian vessels without provocation, his actions cannot be divorced from this human response." Xylax couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Draconids, traditional allies of the Floraxian Empire, siding with the humans? Thaxus apparently couldn't believe it either. "You would take the side of these primates? After they assassinated our emperor? After they sabotaged our defense systems?" Sorak's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air, a Draconid gesture of contemplation. "The methods are extreme," he acknowledged, "but not without precedent. Need I remind the Senate of how the Floraxian Empire itself gained recognition? The Battle of Saurus Nebula was hardly a diplomatic exchange of credentials." Scattered laughter echoed through the chamber. The founding of the Floraxian Empire was indeed bloody, a fact conveniently omitted from official histories but well known among the older Senate members. Ambassador Kaito cleared his throat. "If I may, delegates, we did not come merely to accuse or to demand. We came to offer a partnership." His platform's display changed, showing complex technical schematics. "As Captain Frost mentioned, humanity has made significant breakthroughs in understanding precursor technology. Specifically, we have developed methods to integrate it safely with existing systems without the vulnerabilities your current implementations contain." The technical display showed coding sequences and engineering diagrams that made Xylax's eyes widen. Even with his limited scientific knowledge, he could tell this was revolutionary. The Floraxian Empire, along with most Senate members, rushed to implement precursor tech without fully understanding it, Kaito continued. "We took a different approach. We studied. We tested. We proceeded with caution. And in doing so, we discovered patterns in the code that seemed familiar to us." Lyria Neem of the Ethereum Collective leaned forward, her translucent form rippling with interest. "Familiar in what way, Ambassador?" For the first time, Kaito seemed hesitant. He exchanged a glance with Captain Frost, who nodded slightly. "Certain mathematical sequences in the precursor code bear striking similarities to ancient human mathematical systems, specifically to a civilization called the Maya that flourished on Earth thousands of years ago." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. "You are claiming some connection between humans and the precursors?" Grand Arbiter Pax asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. "We are suggesting the possibility," Kaito replied carefully. "We have no concrete evidence of direct lineage. But the mathematical parallels are undeniable." It may explain why our scientists were able to decipher aspects of the technology that others struggled with. Xilax's mind reeled with the implications. If humans shared some connection with the precursors, the mysterious civilization whose technological remnants had shaped galactic development for millennia, it would fundamentally alter their standing in the cosmic hierarchy. The Andromedan delegate pulsed rapidly, a sign of agitation. This claim requires verification through extensive testing and analysis. Of course, Kaito agreed. We are prepared to share our research and work collaboratively with Senate scientists to explore these connections further. Delegate Zurak of the Draconids snorted, sending small flames flickering from his nostrils. Convenient timing for such a revelation, wouldn't you say? Just as you seek Senate recognition. Captain Frost stepped forward on their platform. Would you have listened if we'd approached through normal channels? When Emperor Zorvan was blocking our every attempt at diplomatic contact. Before Zorak could respond, a new alert sounded throughout the chamber. The main display activated, showing a Floraxian military officer whose insignia identified him as Admiral Kraz, commander of the Imperial Home Fleet. Senate Central. This is Admiral Kraz, the officer said, his scales pale with stress. We have confirmed multiple breaches of Imperial security systems. Our fleet command networks have been compromised, weapons systems disabled. We cannot guarantee the security of Floraxian space at this time. Thaxis collapsed onto his seat, all 6 eyes wide with shock. The Empire is defenseless? Xilax stepped forward. Admiral, what's the status of the Imperial Palace? Secure but compromised. Commander, Kraz replied. The human strike team disappeared after the assassination. But they left behind devices interfaced with our central systems. Our technicians are afraid to remove them for fear of triggering additional failures. They are not bombs, Captain Frost interjected loudly. They are repair modules. Once we have a formal agreement, they will actually fix the vulnerabilities in your systems. Consider it a goodwill gesture. Admiral Kraz's eyes narrowed at the human woman. You expect us to believe that? You don't have much choice, do you? She replied with a shrug. But as a show of good faith, she tapped something on her wrist device. Throughout the chamber, environmental systems suddenly hummed back to life. The lights stabilized, and the platforms that had been drifting slightly due to gravitational fluctuations steadied. Senate systems are now restored to full functionality, she announced. With improved security protocols, I might add. Grand Arbiter Pax's tentacles writhed in confusion. You are relinquishing your leverage? Ambassador Kaito smiled. Not relinquishing, Grand Arbiter, demonstrating. We could maintain control of your systems, or we could help secure them. We prefer the latter. Partnership over domination. Xilax found himself oddly moved by the gesture. It was either a masterful stroke of diplomacy or genuine good faith, perhaps both. The next hours passed in a blur of debate, proposal and counter-proposal. Xilax, thrust into a diplomatic role he'd never trained for, found himself becoming an unlikely advocate for human representation. Not out of any particular love for the species, but from a growing recognition that the Senate and his empire had grievously underestimated them. Better to have such a resourceful species as allies than enemies. As the emergency session neared its conclusion, Grand Arbiter Pax called for a formal vote. The motion before the Senate is as follows: to grant provisional representation to humanity, pending a full review of their claims regarding precursor technology and a formal investigation into the alleged violations of Senate law by the late Emperor Zorvan. Additionally, the motion includes a ceasefire agreement and the establishment of a joint technical commission to address the security vulnerabilities in Senate systems. The voting was not unanimous. Several species abstained, and the core collective registered a formal protest, but the outcome was clear. Humanity would join the Galactic Senate. As the session adjourned, Xilax found himself face-to-face with Captain Maya Frost in one of the chamber's many corridors. Commander, she greeted him with that strange human gesture, a smile. I wanted to thank you for your honesty in there. It couldn't have been easy. Zylax studied her curiously. Up close, humans seemed even more fragile, soft-skinned, with only 2 eyes and a comical lack of natural defenses. Yet this particular specimen had orchestrated the assassination of the most heavily guarded being in the galaxy. "You realize," he said slowly, "that regardless of the Senate's decision, there will be elements within the Floraxian Empire who will demand blood vengeance for the Emperor's death." Captain Frost's smile didn't waver. "I counted on it, actually. Floraxian honor culture is well documented." "Then why?" "Because I volunteered," she said simply. "Single target operation, minimal collateral damage, maximum political impact. And because I have got something most Floraxians won't expect." "And what's that?" Zylax asked, genuinely curious. Her smile widened. "Friends in high places. Like the newly appointed acting representative of the Floraxian Empire to the Galactic Senate." Zylax blinked all 6 of his eyes in surprise. "I'm not your friend, human." "Not yet," she agreed. "But you are reasonable. You value truth over blind loyalty. And you will be instrumental in the transition period as our species learn to work together." Before Zylax could respond, Ambassador Kaito approached. "Captain, we are needed at the technical briefing," he said, then turned to Zylax with a respectful nod. "Commander Vorn, the delegation from Earth would like to formally invite you to visit our homeworld once the immediate crisis has stabilized. We believe cultural exchange will be vital to building lasting peace." Zylax found himself oddly tempted by the offer. In all his years of service, he'd never actually seen Earth except in official briefings that portrayed it as a primitive, chaotic world. "I will consider it," he replied cautiously. As the humans walked away, Zylax heard Captain Frost say to Ambassador Kaito, "See, I told you he was the reasonable one." "You still took an unnecessary risk," Kaito replied, his voice fading as they moved down the corridor. "The operation called for intimidation, not actual assassination. The Emperor made it personal when he called the Stargazer victims pests." Frost's voice drifted back. "My sister was on that ship." Zylax stood frozen, processing this new information. The assassination hadn't just been political strategy, it had been personal vengeance as well. Somehow, that made it both more understandable and more terrifying. Later, as Zylax returned to his quarters to prepare his preliminary report to the Imperial Conclave, he found himself staring at the official Senate roster, recently updated to include humanity, Earth and associated colonies as a provisional member. The Senate had existed for over 7,000 cycles. Each species had come and gone, risen and fallen, but the basic power structures had remained remarkably constant. The Floraxian Empire had stood at the apex of that structure for nearly 2,000 cycles. Until today, when a human walked into the Galactic Senate and dropped the Emperor's head. Zylax had the unsettling feeling that this was only the beginning of changes to come. He activated his communication terminal to begin his report. To the Imperial Conclave of the Floraxian Empire, he dictated, "I regret to inform you that the Galactic Order as we have known it has ended. A new era has begun, and we would be wise to adapt accordingly." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "The humans have a saying, I'm told, speak softly and carry a big stick. Today they showed us their stick. I recommend we listen very carefully to what they say next."